Hey guys, tonight we're going way back, to the sandy banks of the ancient Nile, where people wore linen skirts, shared stories in the glow of oil lamps, and cured infections with fermented porridge. You're in a tiny Nubian village now. It's hot. The air smells like wet clay, sweat, and something sour simmering just out of sight. A river wind rustles the papyrus leaves. You squint against the sun, your stomach growling, and someone hands you a heavy ceramic cup. You lift it, cautiously. Whatever's inside is lukewarm and smells, well, it smells like if yogurt, vinegar, and swamp water got together and had a weird baby. But you're polite, and kind of desperate, so you sip. And strangely, it helps. Not in a dramatic, TV commercial way, there's no glow or instant relief. But your belly eases. Your headache fades. The cough you didn't even realize you had quiets. You hand back the cup. The village elder nods knowingly and waddles away, muttering something about grain gods and the mold spirit. Now, this might sound relaxing, but you probably wouldn't survive the digestive ecosystem of ancient Nubia. Let's just say they had a very intimate relationship with bacteria, mostly the friendly kind, but not always. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing how far this sleepy little community reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The clay cup you sipped from is part of something much older and weirder than it looks. The Nubians didn't invent medicine, but they did stumble into one of the world's earliest forms of antibiotic treatment by total accident. Long before the word probiotic sold trendy yogurts, and long before we discovered penicillin growing on bread crusts, these ancient people were sipping on porridge that healed them from the inside out. Scientists only figured this out in the 20th century, when they x-rayed ancient Nubian bones and saw glowing bands. No, really, like sci-fi style. The glow came from traces of tetracycline, an antibiotic we didn't officially discover until the 1940s. But in 300 BCE, Nubians were brewing it in clay pots. Casual. You sit on a low stool beside a smoky fire, watching the elders tend the bubbling brew. It's mostly millet or sorghum, those hardy, ancient grains that can grow even when the Nile forgets to flood. The women stir constantly, using worn sticks that look like driftwood. The porridge bubbles and pops, releasing a vinegary tang that makes your nose twitch. They call it dita, or something like it, and they use it for everything. Hunger, fever, sore feet, marriage negotiations. No joke. You offer to help stir and immediately regret it. The heat from the pot feels like a dragon's breath, and your arms start to ache. Still, you stick with it, because someone said this might help the mysterious rash spreading across your ankles. Later, someone pats your shoulder and hands you another cup. It's even funkier than the first one, if that's possible. But again, it works. The rash recedes. Your joints feel less tight. You begin to wonder if this is some kind of magic. Spoiler, it's not. It's mold. Helpful mold, but still, technically mold. Here's the part that makes modern doctors either laugh or cry. Historians still argue whether Nubians intentionally fermented their porridge to produce medicine or if it just happened. Maybe they noticed that people who drank the sour stuff got better more often than those who didn't. Maybe they chalked it up to spirits, or the Nile's blessings, or grandma's gut instinct. Whatever the case, they kept brewing, and healing, and passing it down. You lean back now, watching the Nile shimmer through reeds. Someone's singing a low, croaky tune that's more rhythm than melody. Kids chase a goat around the fire. Smoke drifts. Time slows. And in the warm dusk, you realize you don't care if it was accidental or divine. The porridge is working. You're healing. Slowly, sourly, but surely. You're up with the sun now, barefoot in the dew-wet grass, following a trail of hollow footprints toward the river's edge. There's a hum in the air, not from bees or birds, but from the low, rhythmic chanting of women already hard at work. You arrive at the fermentation site, where the Nubians' secret recipe doesn't begin in kitchens, but beside the Nile itself. Here, sorghum grain is piled in damp baskets, some half covered with rush mats, others left open to the breeze. The grains are soaked, sprouted, mashed, and then left in wide clay vats to stew in their own yeasty perfume. You wrinkle your nose as you pass one pot, a sour-sweet stench that somehow smells like both vinegar and cheese. It's not bad, exactly. Just challenging. The villagers move like they've done this for centuries. Because they have. This morning, you help rinse grain in shallow baskets, letting the muddy river water slosh over your hands. It's not the cleanest method, but it works. And besides, they'll boil everything later, probably. Once rinsed, the sorghum's left in big, sun-warmed jars. It's covered in a thin cloth, more to keep out crocodile flies than anything else. You watch as one of the elders sprinkles crushed bark and wild herbs into the mixture. You ask what it is, and she just shrugs and says, "Capice." Very scientific. But it works. Over the next few days, the slurry bubbles gently, attracting a film of harmless mold that everyone just stirs back in. Fermentation is in full swing. You keep expecting someone to pull out a notebook, or at least measure something, but nope, it's all eyeballed. A pinch of this, a handful of that. And the humidity? Part of the recipe. If it rains too much, the porridge turns bitter. If it's too dry, it doesn't bubble right. There's no thermometer. Just elbows, noses, and memory. Still, it's effective. That's the maddening part. Scientists now understand that certain strains of Streptomyces bacteria can naturally produce tetracycline under the right fermentation conditions, like, say, warm jars of porridge kept near a swampy river in Sudan. But the villagers? They just know that when the porridge smells right, sour, sharp, a little grassy, it'll fix your guts faster than prayer alone. You help stir a thick pot with a long ladle carved from tamarind wood. It's hot, sticky work, and as the grains break down, the slurry darkens and gains weight. It sloshes with a satisfying glorp when you lift the spoon. Kids gather nearby, holding their noses and giggling. Apparently, this particular batch has a reputation. Someone tells you this one's been fermenting for nearly a week, extra potent. Reserved for serious illness or weddings. Same thing, really. A young boy sneezes violently beside you, and an elder presses a dripping spoonful of the sour mix into his mouth. He grimaces like he's been poisoned, then wipes his face on your tunic. Thanks, kid. By mid-morning, the fermentation site buzzes with energy. Pots are tasted, stirred, repotted. Some jars are buried in cool sand to slow the process, others are covered with fresh banana leaves to trap heat. Historians still debate whether these techniques were passed down intentionally or if Nubian villagers just had incredible gut instincts. Literally. You catch a moment's rest on a low rock, your hands caked in grain pulp, your nose tingling from the tang in the air. The Nile glistens nearby. A kingfisher plops into the water, splashing like a child. Insects hum. Someone starts singing a song about a god who turned into a pot of porridge to escape marriage. You smile. It's clear this isn't just food. It's not just medicine either. It's culture, myth, therapy, and tradition ladled into a single ceramic jar. And even though no one calls it antibiotic, and there's definitely no pharmacist in sight, you feel strangely safe. Like this sour, bubbling porridge is the closest thing ancient Nubia has to a health plan. You reach for another cup. This time, it goes down smoother. Or maybe you're just getting used to the funk. You've only been in the village a few days, just long enough to learn the rhythm of the sun and the names of a few goats, when something unfortunate happens. You're exploring a shady bend of the Nile, eyes on a kingfisher when you should have been watching your feet. There's a splash, a yelp, and then sharp, unmistakable pain. One of the smaller crocodiles, barely longer than a canoe paddle, nipped your calf and darted off like it regretted the whole encounter. You're fine. Mostly. Just a shallow gash and a bruised ego. But now you're limping back to the village, leaving little dots of red on the path. A child sees you and screams, not in fear, but in that delighted, dramatic way kids love when something mildly disastrous happens. Crocodile bite, he shouts, as if announcing a feast. Soon, you're seated on a woven mat, trying not to pass out from embarrassment or blood loss, while an elder woman examines your leg with all the urgency of someone inspecting a mildly bruised mango. It's fine, she says. Just a little kiss from Sobuk. You'd rather Sobuk kept his affections to himself. She disappears into her hut and returns moments later with a wooden bowl filled with a warm, mushy substance you immediately recognize, fermented porridge. You've been drinking this stuff. Now it's going on your leg? Excellent. With practiced hands, she scoops a spoonful and slathers it over the bite. It smells sharper than usual, almost blue cheesy, with an undertone of spoiled almonds. You wince, expecting a sting. But the porridge is oddly cooling, soothing. She wraps your calf in layers of linen, then plops a small lump of the porridge into your hand and tells you to eat it. Inside and outside, she says. Heal both ways. You do as you're told, of course. Your life might depend on it. The mush tastes stronger today, like it aged an extra day in the sun, but you're beginning to recognize the flavor as something more than gross. It's medicine. Just weird tasting, pre-scientific, mildly rotten medicine. Historians still argue whether Nubians truly understood the wound-healing properties of their fermented mix or just noticed fewer infections when they used it. But considering the survival rates in this village, you're starting to think these elders know exactly what they're doing. Later that day, you rest inside one of the cool mud brick huts. Your leg is propped up. The linen wrap has soaked through slightly, leaving faint yellow patches. A sleepy fly buzzes around your face, ignoring the porridge breath you've acquired. Outside, you can hear laughter and firewood cracking. Someone's singing again, maybe that same porridge god ballad. You catch a line about mold that dances. You drift off for a while and dream about a sorghum field that smells like a bakery and a pharmacy at the same time. When you wake, the pain has dulled. The bite doesn't look angry or red. The wrap's been changed at some point, you slept through it, and there's a fresh bowl of fermented porridge beside your head. Breakfast, apparently. You sip slowly. The warmth spreads through your chest, bringing that same calming effect as before. Your guts gurgle in agreement. At this point, you've stopped questioning what's in the stuff. Whether it's mold or miracle, it's working. As you settle back down, you wonder how many generations it took to get this mix just right. The balance of grains, the heat, the timing. None of it's written down. No dosage, no measurements. Just a long, unbroken chain of careful hands and stubborn memory. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you hear a modern voice say, always consult your physician. Too late. Your physician is a barefoot woman with porridge under her fingernails and a smile that says she's seen worse. And honestly, you trust her. You wake to the smell of roasted fish and river mud, the sun already pushing through the cracks in the thatch above you. Your legs stiff but not swollen, and your stomach is louder than any rooster. You rise slowly, step into the dry, dusty light, and make your way toward the center of the village, where things are already simmering, steaming, and bubbling in various vessels, most of them questionably clean. It's market day, or at least the village's version of it. Traders from nearby hamlets and goat-strewn outposts have gathered near the edge of the Nile to swap dried goods, carved tools, and, of course, porridge. You pass a man selling spiced fish wrapped in reed leaves, and another peddling bundles of something that looks like swamp grass but smells like mint and pepper had a wild child. A woman beckons you over and offers a bowl of her latest porridge batch, this one darker than usual, thicker, flecked with bits of charred grain. You take a cautious bite. It tastes like burnt toast dunked in sour beer, and weirdly, like victory. Her version, she explains proudly, was left to ferment for 10 full days in a sealed jar half buried in the riverbank. For stomachs and spirits, she says with a wink. You smile, trying not to gag. Further down the row of makeshift stalls, someone's selling tiny clay jars sealed with beeswax. Inside, dried flakes of fermented porridge, traveler's medicine. Just add warm water and regret nothing. You watch as a caravan leader buys several, stuffing them into a leather pouch tied to his waist. The porridge economy here is alive and well. It's not just food or folk cure, it's currency. A status symbol, even. Some families are known for their particularly potent blends, passed down like heirlooms. There's whispered talk of one batch that cured a man's blindness. Historians would probably call that apocryphal. But no one here's taking chances. You approach another vendor who's doling out samples of a thinner, drinkable porridge, a tangy gruel with a hint of date and tamarind. This one goes down easier. Children line up with hollowed gourds to sip their daily dose. You recognize a few faces from the night your leg got wrapped. One kid grins, points at your bandage, and gives you a dramatic thumbs up. A local celebrity now, apparently. As the market hums, you notice something interesting. The porridge isn't just being sold, it's being consulted. People bring ailments, worries, even bad dreams to the elder brewers. They describe symptoms, ask for tweaks. Add more sour bark, one woman insists. Less root. It's from my mother. She's delicate. The line between cook and doctor here is blurrier than a Nile sunrise. There's no pharmacy, no shiny vials, but there is a deep trust in the vat, the brew, and the mold-speckled wisdom of those who stir it. You sit for a while beside a stone wall, watching two brewers argue. One believes in letting the porridge rest uncovered under the moon for 3 nights. The other insists on a sealed gourd in shadow. It gets heated, by Nubian standards, anyway. A raised eyebrow, a pointed ladle, a very passive-aggressive stomp. Historians still argue whether these fermentation methods were guided by chemical awareness or mystical belief. Was it science or symbolism? Or both? Probably both. Honestly, that's a pattern you're starting to notice here. Very little separation between healing, eating, and hoping. By late afternoon, the market begins to thin. Bargains are made, jars exchanged, and several goats seem to have changed owners. You walk slowly back toward the village center, clutching a new beeswax jar of your own, gifted by one of the friendlier brewers. It's heavier than it looks. You hold it close, suddenly protective. Like it might be useful someday, or sacred, or both. Back in your hut, the shadows lengthen and the breeze picks up. You unwrap your leg. The wound's healing nicely. The linen smells faintly sour, but the skin beneath looks clean and calm. You feel tired in the way that only hot sun, bartering, and repeated porridge tastings can induce. As you lie down, the clay jar beside you thunks gently, almost comfortingly. Tomorrow, maybe you'll try brewing your own. Or maybe not. That mold is trickier than it looks. The sun hasn't fully risen yet, and already the flies are circling. You swat them lazily as you step out into the cool blue hush of early morning. Across the village, smoke curls from cook fires, and shadows shuffle between huts, already at work. You follow your nose to the fermentation site again, where today's porridge doesn't smell quite right. Something's off. You wrinkle your nose and dip a spoon into one of the jars. It's a little too fizzy, a little too sharp, like the difference between sourdough and actual rot. One of the young brewers clicks her tongue. Bad batch, she mutters. The wind came from the south. You nod solemnly. Of course. The wind. Whether or not wind direction really affects fermentation is a mystery. Historians still argue whether ancient Nubians understood the chemistry of microbial culture or simply followed a 1,000-year-old intuition. But here, wind, mood, phase of the moon, everything matters. You don't question it. Instead, you help scoop out the failed batch and bury it in the soft dirt beneath a fig tree. It smells like vinegar and old onions. One of the elders mutters a quick chant, asking the spirits to accept the waste without offense. The tree doesn't seem to mind. Back at the pots, a new batch begins. This time, the grains are soaked longer, crushed finer, and the water added is lukewarm, not hot. The stirring is slower, more deliberate. There's a rhythm to it, like kneading dough or playing a drum. You take your turn at the paddle, swirling the slurry in slow circles. Your arm aches, but there's something meditative about it, like you're coaxing life from grain and air. Later, while you fan yourself with a palm frond, one of the elders joins you and explains, without being asked, how she first learned to make porridge from her grandmother. She was 5. She spilled the jar, got yelled at, and then made her first proper batch 2 weeks later. That one made a neighbor's fever break. She's been stirring ever since. You ask her if she knows why it works. She shrugs. The mold listens, she says. If you feed it right, it feeds you back. Science, apparently. Back in the modern world, archaeologists are still scratching their heads about this. Bone samples from ancient Nubian graves consistently show traces of tetracycline, not just in adults, but in children too. This suggests the porridge wasn't a rare cure, it was routine. A daily sip of invisible medicine. Was it accidental preservation or deliberate biochemistry? No one can agree. You walk through the village that afternoon, watching how people interact with the porridge. A man rubs it on his shoulder after chopping wood. A child eats it with honey when her belly aches. A young couple drinks it during a quiet, awkward meal. They're newly married and not quite used to each other yet. Porridge makes the silence easier to swallow. There's even a tiny shrine tucked beside the fermentation site. Just a flat stone with a carved spiral and a bowl of dried grain offerings. Someone's tucked a small cloth doll there too, its face painted with thick brown strokes. You're told it's the sister of sour things. No one really explains what that means, but you bow respectfully just in case. Evening arrives like warm syrup. You're tired again, constant movement, heat, and the mildly hypnotic act of stirring living grain. As you lie down, you think about that bad batch. The one that went wrong because of a southern wind. Was it superstition or early microbial wisdom? Maybe both. Your dreams are soft and strange. You walk through a foggy field of giant grain stalks, each one humming. Somewhere ahead, someone's stirring a pot the size of a house. You feel comforted. You feel small. You feel like you're part of something ancient and slow and oddly sour. You wake in the middle of the night to the distant beat of drums, not loud, but steady, like a heart. The air is cool and heavy with the smell of river mud and sweet smoke. You rise, groggy, wrap a faded shawl around your shoulders, and follow the sound. By the time you reach the central clearing, most of the village is already there, gathered in a slow circle around a low fire. The flames flicker against painted faces and swaying figures. You find a place on the edge of the gathering, just as someone begins to speak. It's the elder you met the day you got bitten. She steps forward holding a gourd filled with thick, steaming porridge. Around her neck, strands of millet and dried herbs dangle like jewelry. Her voice rises over the hush. She's telling the origin story of the grain spirit, the one who taught the first Nubians how to stir, how to wait, and how to trust the smell of sour. According to her, the spirit appeared as a bird made of smoke and mold, perching on a broken pot and whispering recipes in a language only the feverish could understand. The crowd listens, nodding, not with belief exactly, but with familiarity. This story has lived here longer than any house, longer than any elder. A few teenagers roll their eyes. A child dozes off in their mother's lap. You listen with one ear tuned to history and the other to something older. When the story ends, the ritual begins. A bowl is passed around the circle, each person dipping a finger in the porridge and touching it to their forehead. Some close their eyes. Others whisper wishes. You mimic them clumsily, unsure whether to pray for health, peace, or better tasting grain. Probably all three. Then comes the smoke, bundles of bitter herbs tossed onto the fire, releasing a pungent fog that bites at your eyes and sticks in your throat. You cough once, loudly. The elder gives you a sideways look that could either be amusement or pity. Historians still debate whether these rituals were purely symbolic or whether the herbal smoke had antimicrobial properties. Some of the herbs burned tonight, like myrrh and resinous acacia, do have known medicinal effects. But try telling that to someone whose main concern is warding off bad dreams and vengeful spirits. As the smoke curls upward, someone begins to hum, a low, rhythmic sound that matches the thump of the drums. The crowd joins in slowly, creating a soundscape of vibration and breath. It's not melodic, but it's deeply calming, like the village is exhaling in unison. You sit back, eyes half closed, and feel your limbs soften. The porridge on your forehead cools and dries into a faint crust. You can still smell it, grainy, sour, earthy. It doesn't smell like medicine anymore. It smells like home. And here's the funny part, no one in this village calls it a ritual. To them, it's just something you do. Like sweeping the floor or feeding the goats. You don't have to believe in it for it to work. Later, the bowl comes around again, this time for drinking. The elder ladles out a smaller dose, thicker and darker, almost like sludge. You sip. It's aggressively tangy, like fermented lemon tea with a grainy texture. And yet, your body relaxes. Your headache fades. Even your bad knee, yes, you have a bad knee now, feels less cranky. The fire burns lower. People begin to drift off, some returning to huts, others curling up right there in the grass. You stay a little longer, watching the embers pop. The night feels gentler now, as if the grain spirit has been properly thanked and agreed not to mess with anyone's intestines for the next few days. As you rise to leave, the elder catches your eye again and gives you a look that says, "Now you're starting to understand." You nod, and head back to your mat, warm and sour and slightly magical. Morning again. But this time, it's not the sun or the goats or even the kids arguing over a half-broken drum that wakes you, it's the smell. That thick, vinegary tang of fermented porridge warming over fire. You open your eyes, groggy and grain-scented, and find a bowl already waiting beside your mat, freshly stirred, slightly steaming, and just daring you to sip it without flinching. You do. Because at this point, what else are you going to do? Say no to the village health plan? This batch is sharp. Not bad, just intense. Like it aged in a cave with a goat. But as the first spoonful slides down, your gut purrs with something dangerously close to contentment. A neighbor sees you eating and nods approvingly. A sour spoonful a day, she says, keeps the flies and fever away. You're not sure if it's actual wisdom or just marketing, but you go back for a second bite. Soon, you're seated with a few other villagers near the shade of a thatched awning, each of you clutching your bowls like sleepy pilgrims. There's no conversation, just the quiet scraping of spoons and the occasional polite burp. You feel like you're part of some ancient breakfast club, membership contingent on a daily tolerance for mildly spoiled grain. One of the elders begins mixing a new batch nearby. You watch as she measures nothing, uses no tools beyond her hands and a worn clay scoop, and yet somehow produces a slurry of near-perfect consistency. She tastes it with her pinky finger, grimaces, then nods with satisfaction. You ask her why she bothers with the same porridge every single morning. She shrugs. Because it works. Also, because people get cranky without it. Fair. By midday, the village is humming. Children chase chickens. Two men argue over who forgot to reseal the fermentation jar. Spoiler, it was both of them. A pregnant woman sips porridge from a small jug, pausing occasionally to wipe her brow. You overhear someone say that the sourness helps with nausea and spirit balance. You're not sure if that's a medical opinion or a supernatural one. Or both. Again, what you do know is that your body feels lighter, less like a guest and more like someone slowly getting repotted in Nubian soil. The scratch in your throat is gone. The heat doesn't press on you quite so heavily. Even your injured leg is looking less like a crocodile appetizer and more like a regular, functioning limb. Still, there's debate. Always debate. A younger villager, clearly the skeptical type, grumbles about the daily porridge routine. I don't feel anything, he says. I just get gassy. Another replies, that means it's working. They argue playfully for a bit before getting distracted by a passing dog. Historians still argue too, by the way, whether the porridge's healing effects were intentional or just a happy accident of warm climate and clever grain use. Whether Nubians cultivated the exact molds and bacteria on purpose or just got lucky with the local environment. There's no papyrus manual, no written dosage charts. Just bones that glow faintly under X-ray and a 1,000-year tradition of spoon-fed medicine. Later that afternoon, someone offers you a chance to help serve porridge to a few elders. It's an honor, apparently. You try not to spill any, and when you do, you definitely do, no one scolds you. One of the older men just chuckles and mutters, even the grain needs to stretch its legs sometimes. By nightfall, you're full, not just of porridge, but of some quiet, creeping sense that this strange, sour routine might actually be doing more than keeping people full. It's holding them together. Every spoonful is a kind of reminder. You live here, you heal here, you ferment and bubble and rest here. You curl into your mat, your stomach warm, your limbs loose. There's a jar beside you now. Not just a gift, but a signal. Tomorrow, it's your turn to stir. The next morning, you are woken, not gently, by the sound of someone banging a spoon against a pot. It's the universal signal in the village for rise and stir. Your time has come. You shuffle to the fermentation site, rubbing your eyes and thinking longingly of modern coffee. Instead, you're handed a wooden paddle longer than your arm and pointed toward a vat of porridge so thick it's practically sentient. The mix bubbles faintly, rising and falling like it's breathing. You prod it once and it answers with a wet blorp. It's unclear whether this porridge is breakfast, medicine, or both. Honestly, it might be closer to beer than anything else. You stir. Slowly at first, then more deliberately. The texture is almost hypnotic, gritty but soft, like a bowl of warm, sourdough cement. You fall into a rhythm, and as you do, an elder approaches carrying a gourd. Drink, she says, handing it to you. You peer into the gourd. It's a liquid version of what you're currently stirring, more drinkable, slightly thinner, and darker in color. The smell is, in a word, bold. You sip. It hits your tongue like funky lemonade with grainy undertones and a hint of sandalwood. It's not awful. It's also not something you'd serve at a brunch buffet. But here's the wild thing, it perks you up. Not in a caffeine jolt kind of way. More like your organs go, ah, yes, thank you, and resume functioning. You sit for a while with the others who've also been handed their morning brew. It's quiet. No one talks. The only sounds are gentle sipping and the occasional sigh of contentment or digestion. It's a sacred kind of moment, even if it tastes like someone blended vinegar with oatmeal. You're told this liquid version is a staple for travelers, workers, and anyone too sick to chew. It's lighter on the stomach, easier to keep down, and, fun fact, probably mildly alcoholic. No one says that out loud, but after your second sip, your brain definitely takes a soft left turn. You glance at the others. One man's eyes are closed. Another's humming faintly. A third is talking to a chicken, which honestly seems reasonable under the circumstances. Historians still debate whether the drinkable version of fermented porridge was intended as sustenance or ceremony. Some think it played a role in religious rites. Others argue it was simply practical, a liquid that didn't spoil quickly in the heat, carried nutrients, and soothed the stomach. But whatever its original purpose, it's clear this brew does more than hydrate. It connects. A woman tells you, this porridge sees inside you. She laughs when you raise an eyebrow. It knows if your heart is heavy. It fixes your blood. It quiets your worry. You nod slowly, unsure whether to believe her, or admit that, yeah, your heart does feel lighter. Later in the day, you join a group preparing another batch for tomorrow. They're using a slightly different mix, more grain, less water, and a handful of dried berries crushed into powder. You ask why. Because this one's for celebration, someone says. You blink. What are we celebrating? Someone didn't die, comes the answer. Fair enough. You help grind the grain, measure nothing, and stir with your now familiar paddle. You're getting the hang of it, if by hang you mean splattering porridge onto your tunic in a vaguely ceremonial way. Still, no one laughs. You're part of the process now. Evening settles in like a warm blanket. You sit near the fire, drinking another gourd of liquid porridge, this one slightly fizzier than the last. It tickles your tongue and goes straight to your chest, like a hug from the inside. You look up at the stars. They're smeared across the sky like spilled flour. Someone starts singing again, an old tune about a brewer who accidentally made porridge so strong it summoned ghosts. You don't laugh. Not anymore. You believe it might be possible. You're halfway through another bowl of fermented porridge, this one oddly creamy with a faint citrus aftertaste, when someone taps your shoulder and gestures toward a shady corner of the village. You follow, wondering if maybe you violated some ancient porridge etiquette. Instead, you find a few villagers sitting on low stools, quietly gossiping and chewing slowly, deliberately, on what looks like dried bark soaked in mush. Try this, someone says, handing you a spoonful from a clay dish. You hesitate. It's grayish-brown, chunky, with the unmistakable look of food that's been both forgotten and forgiven. But you're in too deep now to flinch. You taste it. It's a lot. Gritty, bitter, and tingling. Like it wants to argue with your tongue. That's for toothaches, a woman says, watching your expression with amusement. And sore bellies. And sometimes heartbreak. You ask if it works. Sometimes, she replies. Sometimes the chewing helps more than the medicine. You nod as if you understand. Then wince when the bark pokes your gum. This corner of the village, you soon learn, is the unofficial porridge clinic. People come here when the usual spoonfuls aren't enough. There's a separate vat, smaller, more potent, mixed with crushed roots, old honey, and herbs with names you can't pronounce. It's medicine turned up to 11. One man is drinking his portion from a hollowed bone. Another is applying it like a paste to a rash crawling across his forearm. A child sits patiently while an elder dabs porridge behind her ears, apparently a cure for both fever and nightmares. The logic here is not always obvious, but the faith is consistent. They trust this fermented stuff to solve everything from digestive woes to back pain to unspoken grief. You think about how many times in your own world someone reached for ibuprofen or green tea or that one weird wellness app, and suddenly this all feels very familiar. Historians still argue whether fermented porridge functioned more as a medicine or a ritual comfort. Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe healing always involved a little performance. A bowl, a gesture, a rhythm, a shared belief that this will help. You watch an elder stir a thick version of the brew, this one flecked with something black and bitter smelling. You ask what it's for. Wounds that don't want to close, she says. You don't ask how she knows. You don't need to. Nearby, two women are laughing. One claims that her cousin once put porridge on a goat's cracked hoof and the goat started walking like royalty the next day. The other swears she used it to chase away her husband's mistress. They both cackle until tears run down their cheeks. You grin, and spoon another bite into your mouth. There's comfort in the idea that a single dish could be both a cure and a cause for gossip, both sacred and completely mundane. A substance that belongs in bowls, on skin, in stories, and occasionally on goats. Later that day, a minor scuffle breaks out when two teenagers argue over whose grandmother makes the strongest healing porridge. One claims hers once brought a man back from what was basically death. The other retorts, yeah, well, mine uses root ash, and yours just uses swamp weeds. They're pulled apart before it gets physical. Everyone laughs. Sort of. As evening arrives, you help clean the smaller clinic area. Clay bowls are rinsed. Leftovers are buried or fed to the ever-hungry chickens. A jar of particularly stinky mash is sealed and tucked into the cool shade for another day. Your hands smell like herbs and earth. Your stomach is full. And your mouth? Still tingling from that bark. You sit quietly in the fading light, wondering what modern medicine might look like if it included a little more laughter, a little more ritual, and just a dash of fermented porridge applied behind the ears. You're starting to feel confident, dangerously so. The porridge doesn't make you gag anymore. You can identify at least 3 different fermentation personalities just by smell: the sharp berry sour one, the mellow yeasty one, and the terrifyingly fizzy one that smells like it could clean metal. You even have a favorite stirring stick, slightly curved, smooth from years of hands and patience. So when someone asks if you want to check on a burial jar, you don't hesitate. You follow a thin path away from the main huts, toward a cluster of mounds topped with painted stones and bundles of dried reeds. It's quieter here. Even the wind tiptoes. The jar sits half buried in the ground beside one of the older graves. It's sealed with hardened resin and capped with a stone shaped like a turtle. You're told this batch has been resting here for weeks, maybe months. You ask what it's for. For the sick. For the stubborn, the elder says. For the ones who need more than usual. You get the feeling she's not just talking about stomachaches. She cracks the seal with a bone chisel, and the smell that rises is, well, you're not sure if you should inhale or run. It's strong. Deep. Like the ghost of soup. You lean in anyway. Inside is a thick, dark porridge, almost black, laced with what looks like ash and small white seeds. You reach out to stir it, but she stops you. It's not yours, she says. Yet. You nod solemnly, pretending you weren't going to poke it with your favorite stick. As the elder gently mixes the contents, she explains that certain batches are set aside for specific ailments, or for people so spiritually tangled that regular porridge just slides off them. These deep jars, as she calls them, are for when everything else fails. When sleep doesn't come. When the heart won't listen. When the wound is older than the body. Historians still argue whether these specialized brews were based on early medical intuition or just ritual symbolism. Some scholars believe the ash acted as a mild antiseptic. Others think the burial fermentation mimicked an anaerobic environment, perfect for certain bacteria to thrive. But again, here, it's simpler. The jar rests. The porridge grows wise. That's all anyone needs to know. You help carry the heavy jar back to the village, placing it in the shade near the clinic mat. Already, someone has sent word to the woman with the stubborn fever. The one who hasn't eaten in days. You watch as she's helped forward, blanketed in shawls, her hair matted with sweat. She looks barely there. The elder ladles a small portion of the dark porridge into a bowl, lets it cool, then offers it to the woman with a whisper. She drinks slowly, blinking between sips, as if reacquainting herself with the world. The rest of you watch without speaking. You don't expect miracles. No one here does. But the air seems to hold its breath as the bowl empties. When she finishes, someone places a hand on her shoulder, and another hums softly, a lullaby? A chant? You're not sure. Later, as the sun begins to fall, you walk past her hut and see her sleeping. Really sleeping. Arms relaxed, mouth slightly open, chest rising steady. It's not magic, but it's something. That night, during dinner, someone drops a small bone into a pot of porridge, stirs it 3 times, and declares it done. You ask what the bone is for. Flavor, someone says. And protection. Of course. You eat slowly, thoughtfully, thinking of that dark jar and the way even medicine can rest. Not every cure comes in a rush. Some take time, and soil, and silence. You look down at your bowl. There's something hard at the bottom, a goat knuckle, maybe. Or a talisman. Or both. You decide to leave it where it is. You're lying on your mat tonight, not quite asleep, not quite awake, listening to the hum of insects and the occasional grunt of a goat settling into dreams of hay and superiority. The air is heavy with the familiar scent of smoke and grain, a smell that's become as comforting as a blanket. But this time, there's something else layered beneath it. A stronger sour note. Almost musky. You follow it. Out past the fire pits, past the fermenting vats and the quiet rows of reed huts, you find yourself at the edge of the village. Here, tucked between two low clay walls, is a lidded jar. You've seen it before, always off to the side, never touched. Tonight, it's open. Steam rises from the top like breath from an animal's nostrils. An elder is there, half asleep on a stool, mumbling to herself in a rhythm that sounds suspiciously like a recipe. You clear your throat softly, and without opening her eyes, she says, "Sit. Keep it company." So you do. You sit beside the vat, warm against your ankles, and listen to it bubble. Not aggressively. Just gently, like a cat purring after a long meal. The scent is intense, richer, deeper, more complex than the daytime batches. You feel like you're eavesdropping on a conversation between microbes. "This one only ferments by moonlight," the elder mutters. "Day sun's too proud. Night cools the temper." "Sure. Why not?" She hands you a small wooden cup with a dip of the midnight batch. It's thicker than usual, almost like pudding, with flecks of something green floating in it. You taste it carefully. The flavor is mature. Not older. Wiser. Like it's seen things. This is the porridge they make for dreamers, you're told. For those who wander too far in sleep. For children who talk to shadows. For elders who forget their own names. It's not about healing the body. It's about anchoring the self. Historians still debate whether night-brewed porridge had unique properties or whether it was purely ritual. Some point to temperature as a factor in different bacterial growths. Others argue it was psychological, the belief that nighttime brews had calming powers shaped how they were experienced. You sip again. Whether it's placebo or real fermentation science, it works. Your thoughts slow. The edges of your brain feel less sharp. The night presses against you like a soft wall. The elder has nodded off entirely now, her head bowed, hands still gently stirring the vat with a curved ladle that looks older than some family trees. You take over the motion, slow, steady, clockwise. The porridge resists at first, then relaxes under your rhythm. The stars blink above you. Something scurries in the underbrush nearby but doesn't come close. Even the animals seem to respect this moment. You think about how odd it is, sleep medicine made from food. But then again, what else is sleep but feeding the body from the inside out? A nourishing pause. A slow fermentation of thoughts into dreams. Eventually, the elder stirs, this time metaphorically, and hands you a cloth-wrapped packet. Inside are dried bits of the dream porridge, pressed flat, hard as bark. "Boil these," she says. If the night gets too loud, you thank her, tuck the packet into your tunic, and make your way back to your mat, half floating. You can still taste the funk on your tongue, like earth and metal and something medicinal hiding in the back row of a jazz club. As you lie down again, the village quiets completely. Not even the goats mutter. And you sleep. Deep. Dreamless. Like a vat sealed beneath a mound of clay, bubbling in the dark, growing wiser by the hour. You wake late the next morning, a rare luxury in the village where dawn usually nudges everyone out of bed with a sweaty palm and the threat of more stirring. But today, you've been allowed to rest. Your first thought, before your eyes even open, is of that midnight porridge, still faint on your breath, as if your dreams had flavor. You stretch, blink into the dusty light, and roll onto your side to find something unexpected waiting near your mat, a wooden tray. On it sits a small bowl of thick porridge, darker than usual, a little crusted at the rim, and topped with something green. A leaf? A herb? Possibly both. Beside it, a cup of clear water and a folded scrap of cloth. It's not a breakfast tray. It's an invitation. You carry it outside, and someone motions for you to follow. You're led to a shady corner of the village, where a group of elders sits in a half-circle, each with a bowl of their own. No one speaks for a while. You sit. You eat. Slowly. Today's porridge is different. Richer. Grainer. It tastes like it was brewed for weeks in a clay pot with a grudge. Yet the texture is soft, yielding. And the aftertaste is oddly sweet. Like something good survived inside something sour. One of the elders catches your eye and nods. "You're eating medicine older than pyramids," she says, as if this should be obvious. You nod, mouth full, resisting the urge to say cool with a mouthful of ancient antibiotics. And it's true. As archaeologists have discovered, the bones of ancient Nubians, buried between 350 and 550 CE, show unmistakable evidence of tetracycline. The antibiotic left bands in the bone, like tree rings made of medicine. Scientists were baffled when they first spotted it under ultraviolet light. How could people that ancient possibly have been dosing themselves with an antibiotic modern medicine wouldn't officially discover until nearly 1,500 years later? The answer, it turns out, was in the porridge. Or more specifically, in the bacterialized fermentation process used to make it. Streptomyces, a naturally occurring genus of bacteria that produces tetracycline, thrived in the warm, grain-rich slurry that Nubians left to ferment for days or even weeks. And then they drank it. Regularly. Casually. Possibly without ever realizing they were ingesting a broad-spectrum antimicrobial agent that would later save millions of lives. Historians still debate whether this was accidental, intuitive, or a stroke of prehistoric brilliance. Were the Nubians ancient biochemists or just lucky grain bubblers? No one can agree. You take another bite, trying to taste the history. The microbes. The glow-in-the-dark bone bands. Someone begins talking softly, telling the story of a boy who lived in a nearby village generations ago, a boy who used to get fevers every month like clockwork. His mother tried everything, herbs, prayers, sleeping under stars, goat hair charms. Nothing worked. Then, one day, she left a small bowl of porridge uncovered on a stone in the sun for 2 weeks. When she finally stirred it, it had a crust like old leather and a smell like wet bread left in a drawer. She fed it to the boy anyway. He never had another fever. You nod. You've heard 6 different versions of this story now, each with its own details. In one, the porridge glowed. In another, the boy sprouted extra teeth. In the funniest one, the porridge burped after he drank it. You finish your bowl. Your stomach feels strong. Settled. There's a quiet alertness behind your eyes, like someone just opened a window inside your skull. Later, you help sweep the fermentation area. The pots are sleeping, most covered with leaves or bits of linen to keep the flies out and the spirits in. You find yourself patting one of the jars gently, like a pet. Someone sees you and doesn't laugh. They just nod. You're part of the rhythm now. You go to bed that night with clean hands and a belly full of fermented legacy. And before you fall asleep, you whisper a thank you, not to any god in particular, but to the bacteria, the grain, and the stubbornly wise people who stirred healing from nothing but mud, mold, and time. You've never traveled this far from the village before. The road, if you can call a line of flattened grass and stubborn goat tracks a road, winds alongside the Nile like a lazy snake. The sun is a blazing coin above you, the river glitters beside you, and slung across your back is a small satchel. Inside it, wrapped in leather and linen, is something more valuable than gold in this part of the world. 3 clay jars of fermented porridge. Travel ready. Medicine to go. You're tagging along with a group of traders today, moving between Nubian settlements with baskets of dried fish, copper trinkets, and, you guessed it, jars of thick, sour mash that could fix a stomach, soothe a rash, or, if someone's being dramatic, revive the dead. You're not in charge of the jars. You're just the apprentice mule. But still, there's something thrilling about it. Every step down this dusty path feels like a pilgrimage in Crocs. Not the shoes. The river monsters. The traders are a chatty bunch. One boasts that his sister's porridge can cure blindness. Another laughs and says hers makes people see things, not quite the same. Someone else swears that a single spoonful cured a priest's snoring. Or at least made him quiet, they add with a wink. As you walk, the jars clink together softly inside your satchel. It's a gentle reminder of their weight, not just physical, but cultural. These aren't just meals. They're inheritance in a sealed pot. Around midday, you reach another village. Smaller than yours, quieter. The people there recognize the traders immediately and greet them with hugs, gossip, and suspicious side-eyes toward your bag. You're introduced as the one who got bit and lived. Apparently, your crocodile adventure has entered the local lore. You help unpack the goods, setting the porridge jars on a reed mat under the shade of a fig tree. People gather quickly. The elder of this village approaches, a wiry man with one good eye and a beard that could shelter birds. He inspects the jars like a jeweler. This one's been resting in river clay, he says, tapping the middle jar. That's for swelling. And sorrow. You blink. Sorrow? He nods. The kind that makes your bones heavy. Right. Emotional arthritis. Makes total sense. He trades a small pouch of dried lotus root and a carved bone spoon for the jar, then tucks it into a shaded nook in his hut. You don't ask what it's for. You've learned better than to question what the porridge knows. Later, someone hands you a bowl of the local brew. It's thinner, darker, and has an unexpected tang of roasted fennel. You sip carefully. It goes down smooth and settles in your stomach like a polite guest with a warm coat. Not bad. Different. You watch the villagers go about their day, noting how porridge is used differently here. One woman smears it on her son's chest for a cough. A man massages it into his own knees before lifting baskets. Children dip flatbread into a chilled version, licking their fingers with glee. Even the dogs get a lick or two. Historians still debate how this porridge traveled, not just between villages, but through time. Some argue it moved with trade routes. Others think the fermentation method sprang up independently in multiple places. After all, grain plus water plus heat equals funk nearly everywhere. But what made the Nubians special was what they did with the funk. They noticed. They remembered. They passed it down with careful stubbornness. Before you leave, the elder with the bird beard presses a gift into your hand, a tiny sealed jar, no bigger than your fist. Travel porridge, he says. In case your own guts get homesick. You thank him, tuck it into your pouch, and rejoin the traders. As you walk away, you glance back once, just in time to see a young girl opening the jar you carried earlier. She sniffs, grimaces, and smiles, like greeting an old friend who always arrives wearing yesterday's socks. The caravan slows near a bend in the river, where the air smells faintly of burnt date pits and sweet water lilies. You're expecting another small Nubian village, mud brick homes, chirping chickens, maybe a goat with an attitude problem. Instead, you hear something unexpected, a man speaking Greek. Not perfectly, mind you. More like someone who once read Greek scrawled on a clay tablet and decided to wing it for the rest of his life. But still, Greek. Right here on the Nubian frontier. You round a cluster of palm trees and there he is, a sunburned, robe-draped scholar scribbling furiously into a palm leaf scroll, surrounded by empty jars and half a bowl of porridge. He doesn't even look up as you approach. One of the traders waves and says, he's been trying to translate porridge. You raise an eyebrow. Into what? Philosophy, the trader says, deadpan. Turns out, the man is from somewhere near Alexandria. He arrived months ago, obsessed with ancient cures. When he heard whispers of fermented grain that healed bones and settled fevers, he packed up his scrolls and set off for Nubia. Now he lives in a lean-to with 2 goats, a stack of smelly notes, and a belly full of daily gruel. You sit beside him, curious. His Greek is rough, his Nubian worse, but between exaggerated hand gestures and a few shared words like medicine and gut, you get the gist. He's convinced this porridge holds the key to understanding ancient health rituals. He believes the fermentation process represents the alchemical transformation of the self, that by letting grain rot just right, the Nubians were purifying not just food, but spirit. You sip from the bowl he's been working on. It's a little sweet, a little sharp, and definitely infused with too much rosemary. But still, drinkable. He beams, gesturing wildly to your face as if to say, see? It transforms you. You try not to laugh. He's so serious. So sunburned. So committed to the porridge as metaphor lifestyle. Historians still argue whether contact between Greek scholars and Nubian healers ever truly happened. There's little written proof, but strong oral histories suggest trade and knowledge moved freely along the Nile. And let's be honest, if anyone was going to become obsessed with sour gruel, it was a Greek philosopher with digestion issues. Later that day, you watch as he attempts to categorize porridge varieties using a crude symbol system, squiggles for sharp, dots for soothing, triangles for sleepy. It's charming, and probably meaningless. But it also feels like something a museum might one day display under glass. You ask if he feels better since starting his porridge diet. He pauses, thinks, nods slowly, then pats his stomach with a kind of reverent gratitude. No more fire here, he says, pointing to his belly. Only soft clouds. Fair enough. Before you leave, he insists on giving you a scroll, really just a palm leaf with smudged ink and a poorly drawn porridge bowl at the top. Underneath it reads, in shaky Nubian Greek script, wisdom bubbles slowly. You tuck it away, amused. Another kind of cure, perhaps. One for minds that never stop boiling. As the caravan moves on, You look back to see him adjusting his jars, squinting at a new fermentation experiment, and muttering philosophical questions to a goat who clearly isn't interested. You smile. In a world where people chase magic, meaning, and better digestion, fermented porridge might be the weirdest and wisest thread that ties them all together. You return to your village a little dustier, a little wiser, and carrying enough fermented porridge to survive 3 plagues and a long weekend. The journey's worn you down, but your gut feels invincible. You've eaten porridge with dried mango, porridge steeped in ashes, and even one with crushed insect shells that probably weren't accidental. You sleep for nearly a day, and when you finally emerge from your mat, blinking at the sunlight like a reborn tuber, something feels different. Not outside, the goats are still yelling, the flies are still persistent, and someone nearby is scolding a chicken, but inside, a kind of quiet hum, like your organs are meditating. You don't question it. But peace doesn't last long. A young boy runs up, panting, eyes wide. "The fever girl's back," he says. You're not entirely sure who that is, but you follow anyway. They lead you to a hut you've passed a dozen times. Inside, a girl, maybe 10, maybe 12, is curled beneath a mat. She's shaking. Her skin glistens with sweat, and her eyes are glassy with that fevered not quite there stare. An elder sits nearby, grinding herbs into a rough paste. You hover, unsure of your role. "Sit," the elder says, not unkindly. "Watch." You do. The elder mixes a spoonful of fermented porridge into the herbal mash, stirs it into a thick, medicinal paste, and begins applying it gently to the girl's chest and forehead. She winces but doesn't resist. A second bowl is heated over a low fire, this one thinner, meant for drinking. You recognize the smell, one of the night batches. Meant to slow the pulse and anchor the mind. The elder spoons it carefully into the girl's mouth. She swallows with effort. Her eyes flutter, then settle. Her breathing slows. The shaking eases, just a little. You exhale. So does the elder. You learn later that this isn't the girl's first fever. It comes and goes like the Nile flood, unpredictable but familiar. Every time, the porridge brings her back. Not always quickly. Not always gently. But it works. Or at least it helps. You spend the afternoon sitting nearby, watching the girl sleep, listening to the bubbling of the cooking porridge outside. Occasionally, someone slips in with more mash or a wordless blessing. The hut feels held together by breath and faith and slow fermenting hope. Historians still debate how much the fermented porridge actually did. Was it just the tetracycline? Was it the warmth, the ritual, the attention? Maybe all of it. Maybe none. But when you see the girl's eyes flutter open in the evening and her fingers twitch toward the bowl, you stop caring about scientific methodology. Later, the elder tells you this mix is always slightly different. Each fever needs its own sourness, she says. Some want to be cooled. Others want to be outweighted. You think about that. Some sicknesses aren't enemies. They're house guests. You just have to give them bland food and wait them out. That night, you help ladle more of the fever porridge into a cooling bowl. The scent is strong but soothing. You almost don't notice the faint bitterness anymore. Your hands move like they know what they're doing. Maybe they do. You lie down with the sounds of distant goats, soft wind, and the slow creak of fermentation. And before sleep takes you, you think about how healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a spoon, a breath, a bubble in a pot, a whisper in the grain. Morning brings drama, as it often does in a village where every person is both healer and patient, critic and cook. You're still rubbing the sleep from your eyes when you hear the unmistakable cadence of an argument, low voices rising like steam from a porridge pot about to boil over. You follow the noise to the fermentation site, where 3 elders are locked in a heated debate over, what else, the mold. More specifically, which mold makes the healthiest porridge. One is pointing angrily at a vat that smells like blue cheese left on a windowsill. Another is waving a dried fungus like a sacred scroll. The third simply stirs, muttering, "You're all wrong." The bubbles tell the truth. You take a cautious step back. Mold diplomacy is clearly above your pay grade. It turns out, this isn't unusual. The village's fermentation community has long been divided into quiet factions, each with its own beliefs, traditions, and superstitions. Some swear by surface molds, those pale, fluffy layers that bloom like cotton candy on day 4. Others argue that the real power lies in the deeper grain layers, where the sourness has aged like wisdom. Then there's the third group, who claim none of it matters if you stir while angry. Historians still argue too, though with slightly more footnotes. Some believe that early Nubians cultivated specific mold strains using bark or local herbs. Others argue the process was entirely environmental, shaped by temperature, humidity, and the occasional lucky accident. And a few insist that mold selection was deeply spiritual, guided not by taste or science, but by omens, dreams, bird calls, or how loudly a pot hissed when stirred. You sit quietly near the edge of the dispute, listening. It's strangely fascinating, this mix of biology, folklore, and mild yelling. The elders begin to call for a test. 3 different molds, 3 porridges, 1 neutral tongue. And guess who they choose? Yep! They blindfold you, because fairness, give you 3 spoonfuls, because science, and wait silently as you taste each one. The first is sharp and bright, with a clean sourness that lifts the back of your palate. The second is earthier, like mushrooms and old stories. The third tastes like regret. Bitter, fizzy, and oddly metallic. You cough politely. The elders nod. Scores are tallied. The second porridge wins. There's a brief cheer, one half-hearted protest, and then, just like that, the argument dissolves. At least until next week. You spend the afternoon learning about mold from the gentlest of the 3 elders, who takes you aside and shows you a basket of dried spores kept like heirloom seeds. Some are rubbed into cloth, others dried on clay chips. This one, she says, is for deep fever. This one for tooth pain. This one keeps babies quiet. You ask how she tells them apart. She shrugs. Smell. Shape. Gut feeling. Naturally. She teaches you how to inoculate a new batch with a specific mold, scraping just the right amount, adding it to warm slurry, stirring in a spiral, whispering to it, not required, but encouraged. You try it yourself. It's messy and uncertain and kind of beautiful. As dusk settles, she hands you a small gourd marked with 3 red dots. My strongest, she says. Don't use it unless you have to. You don't ask what qualifies as have to. You already know when someone's too quiet, too pale, too far gone. You tuck the gourd into your pouch, its warmth pressing lightly against your side like a heartbeat. That night, you sit beside the elder while she tends her molds, humming softly as she brushes stray spores off a cloth and into a jar. She tells you, some people think mold is rot. But rot is just a story told too long. Mold is a correction. You lie down under the stars later, still chewing on that idea. Rot is the end of something. Mold is the rewrite. Maybe that's what healing really is, a chance to re-ferment what life spoiled the first time. By midday, the heat hangs over the village like a damp cloak, and everything slows, speech, steps, even the fermentation bubbles seem to pop more lazily. You're resting in the shade near a half-built goat pen when a panting messenger appears, his tunic clinging to his ribs and a wild look in his eyes. Urgent, he shouts. The prince his stomach is possessed. A few people mutter again, under their breath, but they're already gathering supplies. You, it seems, are going along. A good emergency in the royal household means only one thing: you bring the good porridge. The journey is hot, bumpy, and made longer by the messenger's complete refusal to slow down. Apparently, digestive doom knows no speed limit. You clutch your satchel of jars like sacred relics, every jostle a threat to the careful fermentation inside. By the time you reach the outer compound of the local noble's residence, part palace, part storage shed, you're half-cooked yourself. You're led into a shaded room where the prince lies sprawled on a mat like an overfed lizard. His face is pale, his limbs limp, and the smell in the room? Let's just say you understand the urgency. Several worried servants hover nearby, holding damp cloths and bowls of stale broth that clearly aren't doing the trick. An elder from your village, already there, already stirring, nods as you enter. You brought it? You nod back, carefully unwrapping the gourd with the 3 red dots. The elder lifts the lid. A strong, nutty sour aroma escapes, instantly commanding the room's respect. Even the prince flinches. This is for emergencies, the elder says, and noble bowels count. You watch as the porridge is heated gently over a charcoal brazier, mixed with a sliver of lemon bark, a pinch of crushed date seed, and exactly 4 drops of water from a very specific clay jug that someone insists belonged to a prophet's goat. You don't ask questions anymore. The final brew is spooned slowly into the prince's mouth. At first, nothing. Then a twitch. A moan. A small, respectable burp. The elder grins. It begins. The rest is less glamorous. The prince sits up, drinks more, groans dramatically, and eventually staggers off behind a reed curtain to make peace with his internal demons. When he returns, he looks exhausted but alive. Someone fans him. Someone else sings a soft thank you song to the porridge jar. Historians still debate whether high-status individuals in Nubian society had access to stronger, more refined versions of fermented remedies. The archaeological record offers only hints, specialized jars, rare herbs found near elite burials, and the occasional gold leaf label suggesting for use only in royal digestion. You help clean up the room, though you leave the set management to those more experienced. The elder claps you on the shoulder. You did well. No one fainted this time. You beam. Progress. Before you leave, the prince insists on speaking with you. Still weak, wrapped in a blanket, he thanks you for rescuing his insides. He also offers you a tiny gold ring shaped like a stomach. You accept it with the gravity it deserves. Later, as you walk back to the village, the elder tells you, that gourd's empty now. It needs resting before it can heal again. You nod. It makes sense. You're tired too. Back in the village, the sun is setting. You sit by the fire, stomach rumbling. Someone hands you a bowl of porridge, mild this time, mellow, with just a hint of smoked fig. You take a bite. You're not sure if it's the flavor or the silence or the absurdity of being thanked by a prince's intestines, but something about it makes you feel full in a way that goes beyond food. The emergency's over. The jar can rest. And so can you. The village is quiet today. Not sleepy, not sluggish, just quiet in that reverent way things get when a secret is about to be passed. You feel it before anyone says a word. People move with a kind of softness, eyes lowered, voices kept at a whisper even around the goats, who don't seem to appreciate it. Someone takes your arm and leads you to one of the oldest huts, the one that leans just slightly to the left like it's listening for something. Inside, the air is thick with heat and herb smoke. A single oil lamp flickers in the corner. And seated in the center, cross-legged and impossibly still, is the oldest healer in the village. No one knows exactly how old she is. Some say she stirred her first porridge before the Nile changed course. Others swear she once got into an argument with a crocodile and won. All you know is that she's the one people whisper about when no other cure works. She nods to you, and gestures to sit. In front of her is a low wooden tray. On it, for small jars, each sealed with cloth and string. Beside them, a pouch of dry spices, and a scrap of old linen with something scrawled in charcoal. You're ready, she says, voice like old stone and late night wind, to learn the last mix. You blink. The last? She smiles. The mix we don't teach. Only pass. One healer to the next. You feel your throat tighten. This isn't a lesson. It's a mantle. She begins unwrapping the jars, one by one, and explaining their contents in that slow, hypnotic cadence only the very old can pull off without sounding dramatic. The first jar holds fermented porridge with tamarind bark, used for wounds that speak more than they bleed. The second smells like fire and salt. She says it draws poison, physical or otherwise. The third is pale and almost sweet, used when the spirit won't stay anchored to the body. And the fourth is sealed tighter than the rest. She opens it slowly, and the smell that escapes is so pungent, so complex, that your eyes water instantly. It's not unpleasant. Just big. Alive. She calls it the forgetting mix. For pain too deep to fix, she says. We don't heal it. We feed it something sour, so it fades. Historians still argue whether certain porridge blends were intended to soothe emotional pain, or whether that's just how we interpret it now. But this woman speaks with certainty. Some grief needs to be fermented, not cured. Given time, mold, space to change. You spend the afternoon learning the steps. The timing. The silences. When to stir. When to leave it alone. When to bury it for a night. When to sing. The recipe isn't just ingredients. It's mood. Whether or not the village dogs barked at the moon the night before. You nod through it all, committing every twitch of her fingers to memory. As the sun dips low, she wraps a small packet in the cloth, spices, a handful of dried grains, and a pressed sprig of something green that smells like memory and mint. For your first batch, she says. You take it in both hands, heart thudding like you've been handed a crown made of porridge. Outside, the village has gathered. Word travels fast when the last mixes pass. The healer doesn't speak again. She doesn't need to. Everyone already knows. You are now the keeper of the final recipe. The one stirred when all else fails. The one whispered about in the stories that start with, "There was once a person who couldn't be fixed." That night, under a sky smeared with stars, you open your mat and lie beside the jar. It isn't heavy. Not really. But it carries something weightier than grain. Responsibility. Wisdom. A sour, slow kind of hope. You fall asleep holding it close. You rise early, before the sun crests the thorn trees, before the goats begin their usual morning opera. There's a silence in the village that matches your own, a stillness thick with anticipation. Today's not for tending wounds or soothing fevers. Today, you brew your first full batch of the final recipe. You unwrap the cloth bundle given to you yesterday. The grains feel oddly warm in your palm, as if they've absorbed something from the old healer's hands. You run your thumb along each herb, each pinch of bark, each curious, curled spice with no name you know. There's no instruction sheet. Just memory and faith. You find a pot that feels right. Not the biggest. Not the newest. One that's slightly chipped at the rim, its clay dark with age. You wash it carefully, almost reverently, and place it on the shaded corner near the acacia tree, where the wind hits softly and the ants are mostly respectful. You begin. Water, grain, thyme. You grind the spices by hand, letting their scents rise around you in a cloud that smells like old forests and bedtime. The souring agent goes in next, a starter pulled from an earlier brew. Not too much. Just enough to tell the mix what direction to take. As you stir, others gather. Quietly. No one speaks. Even the toddlers, usually the first to shriek and throw things at chickens, sit with wide eyes. The older healers sit in a circle, not correcting, not guiding, just watching. It's your hands now. Your porridge. The mixture thickens as the sun climbs. The sourness deepens. You test it with your tongue, and it's right. Not delicious. Not supposed to be. But right. You ladle a small amount into a cup and let it rest, cooling in the breeze. It's for her, the girl who hasn't spoken since her mother's passing last season. Since then, she's floated through the village like smoke, present, but unreachable. Her aunt brings her to you, hand in hand, eyes downcast. You kneel. Offer the cup. The girl stares at it, nose twitching at the smell. Then, slowly, she lifts it to her lips. One sip. Then another. Then she sets the cup down. Nothing dramatic happens. No lightning. No sudden tears. But something shifts in the stillness of her body, like a string untied somewhere deep. She leans into her aunt's side, and for the first time in weeks, she sleeps. You're told that's the goal. Not cure. Not a fix. Just sleep. You clean the pot, seal the leftovers, and store them in a cool hollow beside the healer's hut. The lid fits perfectly, as if it's been waiting for this moment. Later, you're invited to the evening circle. Someone plays a flute made from river reed. Someone else hums a lullaby about a porridge that grew so strong it floated a boat across the sky. As you watch the fire dance in a half-cracked jar, you remember something the old healer said before she passed the bundle to you. This recipe is not a cure. It's a promise that nothing stays bitter forever. Historians still debate whether this deeply personal, almost spiritual use of porridge was widespread or specific to certain communities. Whether it was symbolic or therapeutic. Whether it healed or simply helped people endure. But tonight, sitting among people who trusted you with their grief, you stop caring about the scholarly verdict. The porridge worked. That's enough. You fall asleep that night with the smell of bark and grains still on your hands. It follows you into dreams, warm, sour, and steady. A signal that healing doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it just settles. You wake to the smell of rain on dust, even though the sky hasn't yet let go. It lingers like a promise, soft and gray, and the whole village feels suspended in that moment before the first drop. You sit up slowly, muscles loose, breath steady, and somewhere inside your chest, there's a warmth that has nothing to do with fire. You stretch, stand, and walk barefoot to the fermentation area. No one's there yet. The pots sit in their usual places like sleeping animals. You pause beside each one, placing your hand on the lids, checking for temperature, for that subtle give that says the bubbles are still doing their quiet work. And then, like a gentle wave, they begin to arrive. One by one, Villagers come, carrying jars, bowls, folded cloths, sometimes nothing at all. They don't need a reason. This isn't a festival or a ceremony. It's just porridge morning. You've seen dozens of them by now, but this one feels different. Maybe because you're the one now being nodded at with quiet trust. Maybe because the old healer's hut is silent. Maybe because the girl who wouldn't speak, she comes too, with her aunt and a new braid in her hair. You ladle the first servings, not with grandeur or performance, just with the same careful rhythm you've practiced day after day. The porridge today is soft, mild, almost sweet, the kind that forgives easily. You serve it without speaking, letting people take their bowls and settle into the warm silence that always follows. Nearby, someone stirs a pot without looking. Someone else sings a work song under their breath. A baby fusses. A bird chirps. And the porridge continues its ancient, patient bubbling. You sit down beside a new batch, watching the surface shimmer faintly in the morning light. You think about how far this all stretches, through time, through generations, through every bowl passed from hand to hand, heart to belly. You remember the trader who called it sorrow's sponge. The scholar who tried to turn it into philosophy. The girl with the fever. The prince with the curse of a royal gut. The healer who spoke of forgetting. The mold arguments. The laughter. The goat that maybe walked straighter afterward. Historians still debate how much of it was medicine and how much was meaning. Whether ancient Nubians really knew what they were doing when they fermented their grain or if the bacteria just did them a favor. But here, where the jars still bubble and the people still hum, it's never been about proving anything. It's about continuity. About tending something even when it smells bad and looks worse. About stirring anyway. You scoop a small bowl for yourself and eat slowly, letting each bite sit on your tongue before swallowing. The flavor is exactly what it should be, familiar, humble, a little odd. You don't flinch. You savor it. Because it's not just food. It's resilience. It's wisdom. It's healing that doesn't rush. You look around. The morning is beginning to yawn open. The village is stretching its limbs. Chickens shout. Goats stage a coup. Someone drops a bowl and laughs. You sip the last of your porridge and smile, not because it's perfect, but because it doesn't need to be. And now, with the village fading behind you and the jars cooling for tomorrow's stir, it's time to soften everything. Let the fire die down. Let the scent of porridge and clay slip away from your nose, and the quiet warmth of that last spoonful settle gently in your chest. You're lying down again, still, safe, warm. The world outside the hut has slowed to a hush. The air is thick with the sleepy breath of grain and dusk. That slow bubbling rhythm continues in the background, steady, like a lullaby hummed by the earth itself. You've traveled far tonight. From the edge of the Nile through quiet huts and sleepy ceremonies. You've stirred vats and sipped sour, ancient healing. You've watched pain ease and people mend in the gentlest ways. And now, you don't need to hold any of it. Not anymore. Let your body grow heavy. Let your mind trail off, not with worry, but with curiosity, like a spoon left floating in a bowl, bobbing lazily as the world turns soft around it. There's nothing left to do. No more jars to seal. No more mixes to master. Just this. The warmth. The quiet. The slow, sweet fermentation of peace. You're safe here. You're full. And everything that needs healing is already underway, silently, slowly, just like it always has. So close your eyes. And drift. Sweet dreams.